We do. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know it's been reported, and obviously the CTO would have the exact time of that recording and stuff in their archives. But it seems like it was after 3 o'clock, before 4:30, and we know that the tow was canceled because somebody got in touch with Bart Edmondson, who ended up towing the boat himself, being a good Samaritan, of course, now.
So the Triton that he was on, there were 3 or 4 people on that particular boat. That's the one that he had come out on, and the one that his friends say, we asked him to get back on the boat. He didn't get back on the boat. His phone was on the boat. We left. We took on water. We needed help. He said he was going to stay to talk to this mysterious, as you said, Katie. Mysterious Katie says that she talked to him for a minute. It was no big deal. Then his friends called him back, and that's where he went. And she just assumed he went back on the boat with his friends. The issue.
They claim they begged him to board their vessel, but he said no. Let me understand this. According, Caitlin Becker, according to the mysterious Katie, not that mysterious because her sister has posted and we've obtained her photo, we think. She says he left with his friends. They say he stayed with her.
According to reporting by CNN and Mississippi Today, Wells, an 18-year-old from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, traveled by boat to Horn Island on July 4, 2026, arriving at the western tip of the island at approximately 11:14 a.m., according to documents from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. What happened between that arrival and his disappearance that afternoon remains, as investigators and journalists have repeatedly noted, an open question, one that the photograph described in this segment speaks to, without resolving. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has publicly urged anyone with photos or videos from that day to come forward. As of the date of this broadcast, they had not made public statements identifying exactly who was present in the cove at what time.
You are now seeing the photo that Brian Trasher from United Cajun Navy has provided on page 14 of their new timeline report. We're blowing it up. We see 1, 2, 3 at the forefront, 3 white female.
Here, the Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, a Louisiana-based volunteer search and rescue organization, explains to the host exactly what the group did and did not do. He is careful to clarify that the organization is not a law enforcement body and did not conduct a criminal investigation. Instead, they solicited photos and videos from members of the public who were in the area on July 4th, compiled them, and published what they describe as a timeline document. He notes that the photographs were not taken by the organization, they were submitted by people who were trying to help. This distinction matters. In any active investigation, evidence gathered by private citizens rather than law enforcement operates under different evidentiary rules. Investigators can compel records, subpoena device data, and apply forensic authentication tools to photographs in ways a volunteer group cannot. As the Vice President himself notes in this segment, law enforcement may already have seen all of the same material. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has separately stated, according to multiple reports, that dozens of witnesses had been interviewed, though the department has not publicly detailed who those witnesses are or what they said. The United Cajun Navy's timeline report exists as a public-facing effort to organize submitted material, not as a substitute for that official process.
That is all possible. I'm told, and we're asked to compare notes with the sheriff's office, which we're doing. But I was told that there's been a lot of people that have been contacted and interviewed, and there's a lot of people who were there that day that voluntarily came forward to tell what they know, and because they might have seen their boats and pictures, said, "Oh, we might want to go ahead and call them, and let them know, where we were, who was with us, and what we know." So I commend those people for coming forward because it's not always easy.
The Cajun Navy Vice President is asked directly, what time were these photographs taken? His answer is careful. Timestamps on shared or screenshotted photos, he explains, may reflect when an image was screenshotted or reshared, not when it was originally taken. Because of this, the organization noted in its published report that it could not verify timelines from digital metadata alone. He adds that the group used shadows and sun position in the images to estimate that some were taken in the late afternoon, but emphasizes this is an estimate, not a confirmed time. This is an important general point about photographic evidence in investigations of this kind. Digital metadata, the embedded data that records when a file was created, can be reliable, but it can also be altered, and screenshots or copies of images inherit the timestamp of the copy, not the original photograph. Investigators working with original device data through proper legal process have access to more robust tools, including the original EXIF data from the camera or phone that took the picture. Whether any of the photographs publicly circulating in this case have been subjected to that kind of forensic review by law enforcement has not been confirmed. What the volunteer organization was working with, as described here, was submitted copies, useful as a starting framework, but with explicit limitations noted in the report itself.
Coordinates called out from the I think from the Coast Guard or from Marine Patrol when the missing persons report first went out, and basically just try to run these pictures against each other to say, okay, this boat's here now, it's not here later, and again, just create an index. We had to use some software to help us create the index of the pictures and make sure we put it into the best timeline we could. We included social media posts that.
The host is speaking to a Crime Stories investigative reporter, pressing on a specific timeline question, a report of a group of people at the scene at 5 p.m., at a point when, according to the friends who had been on the boat with Wells, they had already departed the island. The friends reportedly stated they left at approximately 4:31 p.m., a departure time the host says should be verifiable by GPS data. According to CNN's timeline reporting, the boat on which Wells had arrived, referred to in the broadcast as the Triton, did depart Horn Island that afternoon. Friends aboard that vessel later told investigators that Wells had chosen to stay behind, saying he intended to keep talking with a woman he had met on the island, and that they had urged him to board before they left. One set of accounts, from the woman's family, offered a different recollection, that Wells had said he was returning with his friends, and she had believed he boarded. These accounts conflict directly, and that conflict has not been publicly resolved. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has not confirmed which version of events it considers more consistent with the evidence it has gathered.
You have to realize a couple things here, and it's getting lost in the muck and the mire, is the friends. We use the term Nolan's friends that he went to Horn Island with. Well, you know what, Nancy? Many people have said that he didn't know Katie, they didn't know Katie before that day, and that Nolan just started talking to her. But now it appears that they, being the group of friends, were communicating with Katie and knew who she was, and that during the...
Then why would they say they didn't know who she was? Call her some girl, a girl.
Well, here's the problem, Nancy, is I keep hearing friends, but you realize that Nolan...
A forensic expert, identified as a consultant to the show, is asked about a specific question. If someone had drowned in the water near the cluster of boats in the photographs, would the body have been visible? His answer is nuanced and instructive. He explains that not every drowning victim floats immediately. Depending on water temperature and other conditions, a body may sink initially and only surface later. He also raises a specific scenario relevant to this scene. If multiple boats were anchored in close proximity, a body in the water could be trapped beneath a vessel and not be visible from the surface. To be clear about what is and is not established, Wells's body was recovered on July 6, 2026, 2 days after his disappearance, from water near the northwest tip of Horn Island, according to multiple reports. The state autopsy has been completed by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office, but its results have been sealed, pending presentation to a grand jury, according to statements from the District Attorney's Office. An independent autopsy commissioned by Wells's family returned a finding of cause and manner of death undetermined pending investigation, with the examining pathologist noting multiple limitations, including that the throat and larynx may not have been available for examination. What the forensic expert describes in this clip represents how drowning investigations generally work, not a specific conclusion in this case, which remains open.
Again, we couldn't verify, but we could tell that it was an African American male on the beach wearing blue swim trunks. We thought that was enough to say, okay, it's possible, but we did
Those
like
are
you
dark
said.
blue.
I mean, the skin tone.
Aren't those deep dark blue?
It looks like it, but Nancy, I don't know if this picture's been enhanced. I don't know if it's been filtered. You know what I'm saying? So again, that's the whole reason why we couldn't corroborate, but was like, okay. And also too, this does create a good.
The host reads from what she describes as a specific page of the Cajun Navy timeline report. She identifies the boat believed to have transported Nolan Wells to Horn Island, referred to as the Triton, as one of several vessels anchored together in the photograph. She states that, according to the report, the Triton later departed without Wells aboard, that the friends on that boat reported they had urged him to get on before leaving, and that his phone was on that boat when it left. The detail about Wells's phone is consistent with reporting by ABC News, citing family attorney Ben Crump, who stated that Wells's friends left the island with his phone. Crump also stated that when the family later received the phone, messages had been deleted. Law enforcement has not publicly confirmed or denied this account. The family's attorneys have indicated they are seeking to conduct a joint forensic examination of phones connected to the case, which they expect would involve the FBI if it proceeds, according to the Washington Informer.
Katie assumed the friends telling him get on, wouldn't have left without him. Okay, so he says, I'm going back with my friends. She thinks he got on the boat. The mystery girl Wells reportedly stayed behind to speak with has been identified. Now,
a reporter on the panel raises a question that the host describes as one of the central unresolved points. The friends who travelled with Wells to the island told authorities at the outset that they did not know who the woman he stayed behind to speak with was. The question posed here is whether that account remained consistent throughout the investigation, and the reporter indicates it did not. According to the panel's reporting, it later emerged that at least one person in the group had text message contact with the woman and was aware of her identity in advance. The show refers to this woman by a first name throughout the broadcast. Per responsible coverage standards, she has not been charged with any crime and has not, as far as publicly available reporting reflects, given interviews or voluntarily entered the public conversation in a manner that warrants identifying her here. What the panel describes, conflicting statements between what friends initially said publicly and what subsequent reporting revealed, has been noted in media coverage of the case, including by the New York Post. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has not publicly addressed what it has confirmed regarding these accounts.
Okay, right there, I'm getting a red flag. That's from the Officer Tatum podcast, who joined us recently. That girl, the mysterious Katie. Remember, nobody who knew who she was. But then later, Dave Mack, do we learn that one of the guys on the boat had been texting with her and knew full well who it was? Where did the name Katie come from?
A Crime Stories investigative reporter raises a detail that reframes one of the basic assumptions about the group. Wells did not ride to Horn Island on the same boat as all of his friends. According to the reporter, the group arrived on several different boats, and there had been an expectation, based on common practice, and stated by people close to Wells, that he would return on the same boat that brought him. The reporter then raises the question, if that expectation was wrong and Wells was actually planning to return on a different vessel, which boat was he supposed to be on, and did that boat leave without him, or did it wait? This is a question the public record has not answered. Multiple boats were present at the island that day, according to the Cajun Navy's documentation and law enforcement reports. The Sheriff's Department has urged all people who were on or near the northwest tip of Horn Island on July 4th to come forward. Who was on which boat and what each boat's occupants witnessed remains unknown to the public. Law enforcement interviews with witnesses have been conducted, according to authorities, but their contents have not been disclosed.
We would get the name of the boats. We would find who was out on the boat that day from its owner, and I would ask them who's on the boat. I would not rely, no offense, on your boozy eyesight from 30 yards away. Okay, no offense, Kate.
Nance, neither would I. Neither would I.
The Cajun Navy Vice President describes a specific photograph from page 14 of the timeline report. one that, according to the person who submitted it, was taken at approximately 4:50 p.m. Central Time on July 4th. The photograph shows an individual partially visible in the frame, described as matching Wells's general description. He is explicit, however, that the organization could not verify the figure's identity, could not confirm the timestamp as reliable, and included it specifically as a possibility to be ruled in or out, not as a confirmed sighting. This is an important example of the responsible framing the investigation requires. Photo identifications in active cases are frequently uncertain. Lighting conditions, image resolution, photo filters, and partial views can all compromise even good faith comparisons. The host, looking at the same image on air, states she does not believe the individual shown is Wells. The vice president acknowledges that the organization shared the same uncertainty and that the photo's value lies in prompting the question, not answering it. No law enforcement agency has publicly confirmed whether this image has been examined and whether the individual shown has been identified.
You provided it.
Rule it out.
You got
Yeah,
it.
use it to rule it out.
Okay,
Rule it
so
out.
is this Nolan? If it is Nolan, this is at 4:50 and proves he's still on the island when the other boat, the Triton, leaves. I don't think this is Nolan. But that's just my own two eyes, 2020 and 2018. It needs to be enhanced. Joining us now,
A veteran trial attorney joins the panel and offers a contrasting take on the value of the Cajun Navy timeline. He acknowledges that the report sourced its material, noting who said what, who witnessed what firsthand, and when information came from social media posts rather than direct accounts. But he argues that this sourcing also reveals the fragility of the information. Digital timestamps are unreliable, images may have been filtered or enhanced, and none of the material rises to the level of independently verified evidence. He concludes that, in his view, the report does not move the investigation forward. The host pushes back forcefully, and her point reflects a real tension in cases like this. The question of whether preliminary, imperfect information has investigative value even before it is verified. In criminal cases, leads that begin as uncertain, a partial photograph, an unverified timeline peg, a witness account that later proves inaccurate, sometimes become the thread that once pulled leads to confirmed evidence. The Gabby Petito case, referenced elsewhere in this broadcast, is one example the host cites. An amateur observer recognized a vehicle in a remote area that authorities had not prioritized, which led directly to the recovery of remains. The value of that tip did not depend on the observer having formal investigative authority.
you start digging, and then you find out what time it was taken. Then you find out if it was enhanced. Then you find out, is that Nolan at 4:50 and the boat has left? You enhance that audio we keep playing. You find out if they're saying, Nolan's dead, I don't know if that's real or not, but I can find out if it's real. So for you, a trial lawyer like yourself, in your own words, won most of them, you know evidence is not handed to you, Mobley, on a silver platter, on top of a Christmas tree.
The host explicitly reminds the audience that the individuals who were on the boat with Wells have not been charged with any crime and are presumed innocent. She cautions viewers directly against harassment and threats, noting that what is needed is for those individuals to be interviewed, separately, and by law enforcement, not targeted online. The host's panel had earlier raised that some public statements made by people in Wells' social circle changed over time. Initial claims of not knowing the woman who remained behind with Wells were later contradicted, according to the panel's reporting, by evidence that at least one person in the group had been in text contact with her. Publicly, the investigation as of the date of this broadcast remains active. According to the Washington Informer, a material gap in the timeline, the period between Wells's last independently corroborated sighting and the recovery of his body, has not been filled. The family's legal team, headed by civil rights attorney Ben Crump, is pursuing an independent investigation that includes forensic audio review of the sea tow distress call from July 4th, analysis by oceanic engineering experts of how tidal and weather conditions could have affected the location where Wells's body was recovered, and possible joint examination of cell phones with the FBI.
Even when it makes no sense. And I have to bring my friend out of probation and say that you can't, go according to every single piece of information you get. It has to make sense to warrant the investigators taking time to investigate. And the fact that they're not sharing with us, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not doing it all. There's no law that says they have to share everything they're finding out with the public.
Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old and from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He had recently finished his senior year at Ocean Springs High School, where he played football, and was described by family attorney Ben Crump as a college-bound athlete. Many questions remain unanswered after Wells was last seen on July 4th, and his body was found 2 days later off Horn Island. According to documents from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat departed from the southern shore of Mississippi at 9:56 a.m. on July 4th, arriving at the western tip of Horn Island at 11:14 a.m. Horn Island is a remote barrier island in the Gulf Islands National Seashore, accessible only by private boat, roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It has no developed facilities. Several of the friends who travelled with Wells told deputies that when they left, he was in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain on the island, a Department of Marine Resources Marine Patrol police report shows. One account, later described by the woman's family in a social media post discussed in this broadcast, held that Wells told her he was returning with his friends, that she had assumed he boarded when they called him over, and that she left on a separate boat without knowing he had not. These two accounts, friends saying Wells chose to stay, the woman's family saying she believed he had left with his friends, directly contradict each other on a factual point, where Wells was and with whom in the final period before he disappeared. Law enforcement has not publicly stated which account, if either, it considers corroborated by other evidence. As of the date of this broadcast, and as of the current state of publicly available reporting, the following remain unanswered: the official cause and manner of Wells's death, the contents of the state autopsy, what the grand jury will find, what forensic examination of phones has or has not revealed, who all of the individuals on the boats in the photographs were, and what happened to Wells in the hours between the boat's departure and the discovery of his body.
Whenever I see a conflict in the evidence, I have a problem. This is all unfolding as we go to air tonight. We wait for that toxicology report.